Welcome back to my channel. Today's shocking story happened in France in 2001. It's early morning, February 8, 2001. A worker employed at one of the nearby farms is driving along the road through the village of Les Écrins in the Seine-Marne department. At one point, he notices something strange in a roadside ditch. It's like a small pile of clothes. The man stops and gets out of the car. He approaches the place and jumps back horrified. In the ditch lies the corpse of a very young girl, dressed only in pajamas. There are traces of blood everywhere. The man realizes after a moment that he knows the girl, then rushes off towards a building a few hundred meters away. The Ciatti couple lives here. And the 14-year-old girl lying in the ditch is Priscilla, their daughter. However, no one reacts to the man's loud screams. Everywhere is quiet. There is apparently no one in the house. The worker takes out his phone and calls the emergency number. The ambulance arrives very quickly, and the doctor officially confirms the girl's death. At this time, a patrol consisting of 2 gendarmes also shows up. However, these gendarmes immediately call the criminal police. Soon a criminal police unit from nearby Melun arrives on the scene. As one of the officers will later recall, they find a scene like out of a Hitchcock film. A corpse lies in the snow, tall trees and an overcast sky can be seen in the background, and the ominous cawing of crows can be heard. While waiting for the medical examiner, officers secure the area. Traces that run from the center of the roadway clearly indicate that the murderer dragged the girl's body from the middle of the street to the ditch and left it there. Near the body lies a strange object that looks like a piece of rubber. The policemen pick it up from the ground. This piece of rubber turns out to be a mask, which suddenly unfolds on its own, and the officers have before their eyes the dark red, yawning face of the devil with empty eye sockets. Was the perpetrator wearing the mask at the time he committed the murder? What did he need it for? This find adds an extra frightening tone to the whole case. A forensic doctor is already on the scene. The corpse is laid out in a position on its back, just as it was found. In fact, the girl is wearing only pajamas and is barefoot. It is difficult to imagine why she left or ran out of the house in such clothing. The doctor finds the presence of dozens of wounds inflicted with a sharp instrument on the teenager's body. That's more than 50 strokes. This number is shocking and also strongly puzzling. It can be assumed that the perpetrator felt emotionally attached to the victim, but it is too early to draw further conclusions. There are marks on Priscilla's hands indicating that the girl tried to defend herself from her attacker. Investigators hope to find traces of the perpetrator's DNA under her fingernails. A doctor still on the scene is taking samples from there. Meanwhile, an inspection of the building is underway. It is confirmed that no one is inside. The living room window is wide open, but there are no traces of a burglary here. However, such traces are visible on the window leading to the utility room, which contains, among other things, the home's electrical switchboard. The glass of this window is broken and taped. This is an old method used by burglars. If they want to get inside by breaking the glass in the window, they put tape over it to minimize the noise of the breaking glass. A clear shoe print can also be seen under this window. It can be assumed that the intruder just got inside this way. Investigators are waiting for the girl's parents. Mr. and Mrs. Ciatti have already been asked by phone to appear as soon as possible, although they do not yet know what is going on, as investigators want to inform them of their daughter's death themselves. Priscilla's mother is the first to appear. When she hears what has happened, she is shocked. She screams and has to be sedated. Questioning her is out of the question for now. Unfortunately, the policemen have to try to get basic information out of her as soon as possible. The woman finally calms down a bit and is able to answer some questions. Priscilla was, as it turns out, the youngest of Mr. and Mrs. Ciatti's 4 children. She was the only one who lived with her parents, as her adult siblings had already moved out of the house. The teenager always stayed home alone for a while in the morning, as her mother and father had to leave for work at exactly 6:30 each day. Priscilla was therefore alone for about an hour. She would eat breakfast, get ready to leave, and leave for the bus at 7:30 a.m. She was going to school in the nearby town of Châtelet-en-Brie, going to the 8th grade. The policeman ask the girl's mother to look around the house and tell them if she notices any changes. Maybe something is different than before she left, maybe some objects have disappeared or appeared, in a word, anything that draws her attention. The woman replies that yes, there is no electricity in the house, and in the morning everything worked perfectly. There are traces of damage on the bathroom door, which looks as if someone kicked the door very hard. These marks were certainly not there before. Other than that, there is nothing missing, and no visible changes. This is confirmed by the girl's father, who soon arrives on the scene. The house and the surroundings of the entire farm are cordoned off, and the police tell the parents that they must move out of the house for a while, as it is necessary to further secure the traces. Mr. and Mrs. Ciatti immediately decide that they will go to their friends Laro, who lived at the other end of the village. The investigation is now taken over by the Paris criminal police. The policemen are already formulating working conclusions. It is almost certain that the perpetrator knew that Priscilla would be home alone at the time. He wanted to scare her, so he took a mask with him, and also turned off the electricity in the house. It's hard to say whether he planned the murder, perhaps events were out of his control. Either way, it can be assumed that the perpetrator knew the victim and chose her on purpose. The footprints also show that the murderer was well aware of the layout of the house. The window through which he entered leads directly to the room where the electrical switchboard is located. Thus, everything indicates that the perpetrator, according to his plans, first turned off the electricity to go to Priscilla's room immediately afterwards. He also went to the bathroom. Perhaps Priscilla tried to hide from him there, and he ran after her. It is also known that Priscilla escaped through the window. Footprints also show that the murderer was well aware of the layout of the house. The window through which he entered leads directly to the room where the electrical switchboard is located. Thus, everything indicates that the perpetrator, according to his plans, first turned off the electricity to go to Priscilla's room immediately afterwards. He also went to the bathroom. Perhaps Priscilla tried to hide from him there, and he ran after her. It is also known that Priscilla escaped through the living room window. Investigators are convinced that the murderer should be sought in a circle of people very well known to the family. Naturally, they ask around, however, no one close to them has any idea who might be involved. Living room. Investigators are convinced that the murderer should be sought in a circle of people very well known to the family. Naturally, they ask around, however, no one close to them has any idea who might be involved. On February 9th, the day after the murder, an autopsy takes place. The forensic doctor finds that there are exactly 60 stab wounds on Priscilla's body. The first blows were inflicted in the upper back, the next lower, which makes it possible to deduce that the victim was attacked from behind. When fleeing from the perpetrator, she ran very fast. This is indicated by the large amount of soil under her fingernails. There are also wounds on the neck and chest. The murder weapon is a rather long knife. Directly, there is no indication of a sexual background to the crime, but in view of the fact that it was accompanied by so much emotion, it cannot be completely ruled out. An intensive investigation is underway. Police officers already have information that Priscilla did not have a boyfriend or any kind of affection, so they must immediately rule out the simplest possible version in such a case. There is a lack of any point of contact. Schoolmates know nothing about any conflicts or even quarrels between the victim and other children or teachers. Everyone at the school says unanimously that Priscilla studied well, was calm, reasonable, and responsible. Several of her colleagues, however, say something that investigators will immediately find highly alarming. In recent months, Priscilla has reportedly mentioned a couple of times that she has the feeling that someone is watching her and following her. She has also said that sometimes when she is alone at home, the phone rings, but when she answers it, no one answers on the other end. The whole case seems increasingly puzzling. Along with the autopsy results, investigators receive the results of DNA tests, isolated from biological traces on the mask. It is the man's DNA. This profile is immediately checked in the database, but the system shows no match, meaning that Priscilla's murderer has never been in conflict with the law before. Priscilla's parents stay at the home of their friends Didier and Laro. The families have been friends since the Ciatti couple arrived in Les Écrins and lived in the immediate neighborhood of Mr. and Mrs. Laro. Priscilla was 9 years old at the time, and a daughter had just been born into the Laro family. Priscilla often came to them and took care of the infant, while her father helped them with small jobs. Mr. and Mrs. Laro returned the favor as best they could. A bond quickly developed between the families, who were neighbors across the fence, and Priscilla's older sister even became godmother to the Laro's younger daughter. In addition, they visited each other often, and also held various celebrations together, including birthdays and New Year's Eve. When the Ciatti family moved to the other end of the village, the mutual relationship remained just as close. Even now, the Laro family is a tremendous support to the devastated parents and relatives of the murdered girl. On Saturday morning, February 10th, that is, 2 days after the tragedy, the victim's mother unexpectedly reports to the police. The woman reports that Didier Laro has been behaving very strangely since yesterday evening. Immediately after Priscilla's older sister said she knew from the police that footprints had been found behind the building of their house, Didier began to explain that he had left for Paris very early in the morning on February 8th, and that he had receipts for purchases made at the time. The woman stresses that it didn't even occur to anyone in her family to suspect Didier of something and thus question him. He started talking about it on his own, and it sounded like he was explaining something. Priscilla's mother says she feels strange and doesn't know at all what to do. Didier and Odette are her friends, after all, and she is staying with them. Police officers take the news very seriously and immediately check basic information about Didier Laro. The man is 39 years old, married and has 2 daughters aged 7 and 2. He is a baker and is working in his profession, currently employed at a bakery in nearby Nanguis. There are no complaints against him, and nothing is known about conflicts at work or in his place of residence. However, when the police check his data in the criminal record, it turns out that Didier Laro had already had a criminal record. That was about 10 years ago. Didier was living far away at the time, and the case involved public exposure. The report was filed by his neighbor. The man did not deny it. He received a suspended sentence, and this thing did not happen again, because there are no other annotations in the system about Didier Laro. Now, however, the mere fact that such an incident occurred draws a lot of attention to his person. The reason is obvious. With regard to the crime committed against Priscilla, sexual components cannot be ruled out, so something may be afoot. Later that evening, the police arrive at the Laro couple's home. The man is home alone. At the sight of a search warrant, he reacts completely without emotion. The search is quickly crowned with success. In the garage, the police find shoes with small traces of blood on them, a latex mask of a corpse and a box for 10 pairs of rubber gloves, with 1 pair missing. Didier is arrested. Police collect material from him for DNA testing. At 11:30 p.m., the first interrogation begins. The arrestee does not admit to anything, so that at first he must first of all tell exactly what he was doing on the morning of February 8th. Didier thus says that he had the day off, so he left very early in the morning for Paris to pick up the CDs, something he had been planning for a long time. The time of departure given by him rules out his involvement in the crime. To confirm this, the man describes in detail the route he took. He even gives the hours and pulls out receipts from his pocket certifying that he had been shopping in Paris. The receipts, however, show times much later, resulting in no alibi for the crime. Didier Laro, it appears, is unable to prove that he was in his car between 6:30 a.m. and 7:30 a.m. and driving to Paris. The man is asked about his private life. He testifies that after 13 years of living together, there is a crisis in his marriage. He and his wife are not sleeping together, there is no closeness between them. Didier claims that it's his wife who is avoiding him, and he doesn't know what the cause is. He tried to fix it, made gifts to his wife, asked her what was going on, but it didn't help. The suspect's interrogation drags on all night. In the meantime, investigators will succeed in establishing that the corpse mask along with the devil mask Didier purchased for Halloween, and that the pattern on the gloves is identical to the pattern found on the tape with which the perpetrator taped the window. They will also determine that the imprint of the sole of the shoes matches perfectly with the marks left under the house, and tests will confirm that Priscilla's blood is on the shoes. In the morning, police officers talk to the wife of the arrested man. Odette Leroux is very reserved in her testimony. One gets the impression that she doesn't want to say too much. Anyway, she reports that she has recently moved away from her husband. When asked why, she replies that his behavior in recent months was highly disturbing. He kept seeking contact with the Ciatti family. This was completely incomprehensible and even abnormal to her. In the morning, the results of the suspect's DNA tests arrive. It turns out that his DNA profile matches that found on biological material taken from the mask and from under the victim's fingernails. Didier Laro, confronted with this information, completely breaks down. He confesses to the crime and says he is ready to tell all. "I loved her, I wanted her all to myself." This confession is shocking even to police officers, who, it seems, could not be surprised by anything anymore. The further confessions of this 39-year-old man are equally shocking. He had been in love with Priscilla for 2 years. He was afraid to tell her this. After all, she was only 12 when the feeling began, but he tried to let her know in various ways when she stayed at their home, taking care of his daughter. When she turned 13, he baked a heart-shaped cake especially for her. He decorated it with strawberries so that the red color could symbolically convey his affection. Priscilla didn't understand the message and didn't appreciate the gift. This made him angry. After all, his intentions were as serious, as he was planning a future with her. Of course, because of her age, at first it would only be a sexual relationship, but after he divorced his wife, he would take Priscilla to Canada, because that was his dream. However, the situation with the cake, and Priscilla's lack of displays of reciprocity in general, triggered a sense of rejection that has plagued him ever since. His love did not diminish, but this feeling began to be accompanied by resentment and then hatred. He thought he would put everything on the line and stage an event whereby he would show Priscilla the strength of his feeling. He chose a devil mask, sold in tandem with another. He intended to enter Priscilla's house while she was alone and frighten her. His plans were this: the girl would awaken from her fainting spell, and he would no longer have the mask, so she would see her savior in him. Then he would take her in his arms, and thus their love story could begin. Experienced investigators still find it difficult to comprehend that a 39-year-old man, the father of 2 daughters, could carry himself with such plans. It is even more difficult to understand that for the sake of realizing these pipe dreams he decided to commit murder and to destroy the lives of 2 families. Didier also recounted the course of events. On February 8, around 6:30 a.m., he lurked behind a shed near the house and waited for Priscilla's parents to leave for work. He put on rubber gloves and taped the window of the utility room to cause as little noise as possible. Successful, he went inside unnoticed. He immediately turned off the electricity to give the girl a little scare. Immediately afterwards, however, he bumped into some furniture, which caused a rumble. He heard Priscilla call out, "Is anyone here?" He didn't answer anything, but she had already run out of the room and managed to lock herself in the bathroom. He tried to kick the door open with kicks, but that failed. However, next to the bathroom was a small toilet, and the 2 rooms were separated by a wall that did not reach the ceiling. So he climbed onto the toilet and stuck his masked head into the 25-centimeter gap above the wall. Priscilla screamed and ran out of the bathroom in a panic. She rushed into the living room, opened the window. She ran out of the house. She was about 300 meters from the road. He ran after her and roared wildly to scare her. Unfortunately, she didn't faint, but kept running, and he had to take off his mask because it was difficult to breathe in it. Priscilla suddenly turned around and recognized him. She stopped and called out, "Think of your wife. What will she do when she finds out about this?" Then Didier decided he had to kill Priscilla. In his testimony, he emphasizes that he did not plan the murder, but on the other hand, he keeps repeating one and the same sentence: "I wanted to kill her so that no one else would have her," so it is an obvious contradiction. The news that a teenage girl was killed by her nearly 40-year-old neighbor, who was in love with her, shocks all France, and even more so the community of small Les Écrins and the surrounding area. Didier's family immediately moves out, Odette files for divorce, and sells the house. In the course of the trial, experts rule that at the time of the crime the defendant had complete capacity to recognize the meaning of the act. In 2003, Didier Laro was sentenced to life imprisonment. And that's the end of this shocking story. Thank you for listening to the end. Goodbye.